the Victory Studios in downtown Little Rock, this is Capitol View.
And good Sunday morning to you. Welcome into Capitol View. I'm Jay Burr. The trucking industry has been under the light for several months now, many now just seeing how vital they are, not to just Arkansas, but the whole country. And here to talk trucking is president of the Arkansas Trucking Association, Shannon Newton. And ma'am, how are you doing this fine day?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, Jay.
Absolutely. Let's jump right into things here. So, again, trucking has really been at the forefront of a lot of conversations when it comes to logistics and moving stuff here, there, and everywhere. I guess what are some of those real big issues right now when it does come to kind of dealing with some of the logistics of the country?
Not unlike some other industries, I think we would start with workforce. That's certainly an issue that our industry is not new to dealing with. You know, we've been talking about a driver shortage for about a decade at this point. But throughout the pandemic, as people realize the essential role, kind of like you talked about, certainly the higher profile of the industry and the professionals that were in it, that were kind of viewed as heroes during that time in which we didn't have, toilet paper or PPE or vaccines, and the role that the drivers played throughout that certainly elevated the profile. And while we were dealing with some workforce issues, we've also benefited from some increased awareness about the role that they play.
And I guess when it does come to addressing the workforce issue, I mean, it's an interesting job to say the least. And, it's one of those jobs, too, where I know the industry is really looking to get younger, not necessarily maybe on purpose, but a lot of folks aging out of the industry. So, I mean, what are some of the strategies that maybe the Arkansas Association is taking when it comes to trying to fill some of those voids?
Sure, like you talked about, it is a complicated problem. If you just look at the lifestyle of a truck driver, there's maybe a limited population of individuals who might view that as a career opportunity for them. There are a lot of constraints with regard to health, with regard to driving record and criminal record, and a lot of barriers that are kind of naturally and in some cases necessarily limiting the pool of individuals that we have available to hire from. And then you lay over, like you mentioned, the aging workforce and the aging of our industry. Our industry experienced deregulation in the 80s, and there's a huge growth of additional employees taking on that truck driver profession at that time. And if you look at the huge growth that the workforce had at that time, and then you roll it forward 40 years or 50 years, all of those people are now entering into their retirement years, or certainly in the latter part of their career. And we do not have adequate pipelines in order to bring people in at the rate in which individuals are leaving the industry. And so one of the problems that you talked about is an issue that we've experienced with, if we do everything right, if we create a better job, a more desirable job, one that is more predictable, that gets people home, and we educate young people about the opportunities, and they say yes at the age of 18, there's actually a federal law that prohibits 18-year-olds from engaging in interstate commerce. And so until we're able to alleviate that issue or somehow bridge that gap from high school education and into the workforce, we're always going to be in this position where we're trying to recruit from manufacturing and construction and other industries, which are also doing well now. And so we're kind of in a position in which, in order for us to compete with those industries and attract people that are actually at a good time. When I was 18, I certainly had less responsibilities. And if I was going to go see the country for 4, 6, 8, 10 years, that younger part of their career certainly makes sense. And we as an industry believe that we need to provide a pathway for that to be an option.
You kind of touched on a little bit, kind of lead me into my next question here. When it does come to younger drivers, the ones that are there, to be allow them to be able to cross those state lines, I guess, kind of in your opinion, how much would that actually alleviate some of just those interstate issues? And is it really a big deal here in Arkansas? Because I do know we've got, a couple of really main thoroughfares here. Obviously there's Memphis and a lot of bigger cities kind of in a day's drive worth of it. But would that help the situation here in Arkansas?
It does help the situation. It's not necessarily a silver bullet, and it's not going to be the solution for every carrier in every situation. But if you think about a lot of the companies that are here, particularly package services or retail distribution centers. It's not only can the 18 to 21-year-old driver not cross state lines, they actually can't touch interstate freight. So they can't even pick up a package that didn't originate in Arkansas in Little Rock and deliver it to Hot Springs because that freight is designated as interstate freight. So removing that barrier would actually allow all sorts of opportunities for relay drivers, or certainly just having that ability to allow those individuals into the workforce would provide value in Arkansas and in other places as well.
Are we seeing too, and again, I kind of always been a proponent of Arkansas doing this, but are we seeing a more regionalization of this industry? And instead of maybe those cross-country drives, I mean, is it more of a kind of like, hey, I can go within a 4 to 6 hour window, maybe a little further than that, and then maybe just kind of pass things off to kind of, as you kind of mentioned a little bit ago, having a little more of a stable, home life, things like that. Are we trending that way, or is that already in place?
The industry as a whole is trending that way and has been for probably the last 4 or 5 years in efforts to make the job more attractive. As we've been dealing with this driver shortage, the issues that tend to come up that would make a driver choose to leave the industry or maybe view it as not an option for them were those, routes where they would be gone for a week at a time. And so where possible, carriers have taken those types of routes and regionalized them as much as possible. And so what we call them relay drivers. And so instead of having, 2 trucks from the same carrier crossing somewhere in Arizona going opposite directions, now can we take that route and can those drivers meet somewhere in the middle and keep each driver closer to their home and get them what we would say through the house more frequently and more predictably, because people can manage, much like we think of a traveling salesman who might be gone for 2 nights a week, or come through the house on Monday and Wednesday and then be back home for the weekend. Those are more manageable positions and more desirable positions. And so to the extent that the carriers are able to create those types of routes, they're certainly doing it at an increasing level.
Well, it is a fascinating industry and one that keeps us all connected here. But Shannon Newton with the Arkansas Trucking Association, man, we certainly do appreciate some of the insights, and hopefully we can do it again.
Thank you for having me, Jay.
Absolutely. Well, when we come back, we go to the Hill because it is never boring up there. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back into Capitol View. Well, the sun doesn't sleep on the district. Here to join us to kind of get us caught up to speed here with one of our fan favorites here, Jesse Tenur, our Washington correspondent. Jesse, how are you doing? How you been?
Oh, just great. Always a great intro from you, Jay, so appreciate that.
Nothing but the best here on Capitol View here. So let's just kind of get into it. I know China has really been talked about a lot here of late. What do we got going on when it comes to U.S.-China relations?
Yeah, right now what the House just was able to do on Friday was a huge win for the White House in terms of policy. There is this massive bill that essentially aims to make the U.S. more competitive with China. It does a lot of different things, but one of the main things that was bipartisan was tens of billions of dollars that goes toward the domestic production, even research of semiconductor chips. Those are, of course, on a lot of people's minds right now, since there's been massive shortages around the world, really, because of the pandemic and different supply chain issues that have stemmed from that. And so they're hoping that this will be a direct fix. But where the partisanship comes into play is really for the rest of the legislation. This ended up being a party line vote, even though in the Senate, its version started off as pretty bipartisan. What Republicans were specifically against was different climate provisions and also trade deal changes. And so now moving forward, since they have to reconcile this House with the Senate version, it's really going to be an uphill battle that the White House is confident will eventually make it to the president's desk, but timing now is in question.
And I guess, do we expect any of the sort of the other stuff that's in this? Because you mentioned some of the climate stuff. I know Republicans really aren't about that life whatsoever. And in fact, even Representative Womack here, letting China off the hook in their role in the pandemic, some other things like that, that I would imagine many other Republicans kind of feel the same way. So despite this being kind of a W right now for the White House, if you take it in its totality, I mean, does this really have a chance of getting through?
Yeah, that definitely remains to be seen. A lot of lawmakers will tell you, don't listen to how I say I'm going to vote, watch me actually do it. And so we'll have to see how it plays out. But to Congressman Womack's point, you're right. That is what a lot of Republicans have been saying, is that this is just too soft on China. They would have liked to see tougher sanctions, things of that nature included as well. But what I was able to talk to Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo earlier this week just about its chances then when it moves into the conference phase now, where the Senate and House work out their differences. She was saying that really the bones of this do remain bipartisan. Sure, there's going to be some changes on some smaller issues, as she called them, but she does remain confident that it will make it to Biden's desk.
Another international incident that we've got going on here, Russia-Ukraine, still ongoing. I guess kind of where do we stand with that? Are we expecting any type of response to this when it does come from the U.S. or the UN in terms of sanctions, anything like that?
Congress is still wading heavily into that debate as well. We were thinking that this week we could potentially see a bipartisan sanctions package that lawmakers have been promising now for some time, but those negotiations are continuing. Right now, it does sound like they do have agreement over as far as different things that should be included, more potential weapons to Ukraine, and then allowing them to pay us back later. But some of the conditions that they're still trying to spell out is just exactly the scope of some of these sanctions, and then how much power President Biden can have over them, whether to kick them in immediately or allow them to phase in over time. Because right now, where the White House, and since Democrats control Congress, where they stand right now is that they don't want to impose any of this until they see President Putin actually move. Whereas a lot of Republicans have been saying we should do this before he does anything.
Oh, it's always an interesting debate. All right, let's bring it back home here a little bit. I know the Supreme Court debate is, I would say, raging, but now you've got these two sort of international things going on that kind of buried what's going on with that. Is President Biden any closer to maybe putting somebody out there on the forefront, or are we still kind of sending out some floaters on who he might actually nominate?
Like you said, even though there is a lot going on, they are really ramping up the action here to make that happen. President Biden did promise that he was going to name someone officially by the end of this month, and that work definitely continues. The White House has floated about 10 names, and we've already seen action among lawmakers. There's been some bipartisanship even playing out among the South Carolina lawmakers over J. Michelle Childs, one of the judges there that is very well respected and on the White House's list. You saw Lindsey Graham and then Representative Clyburn meeting together over that, showing that bipartisanship. And Representative Clyburn's kind of testing the White House here, too, since he was a major reason coming out in support for President Biden when he was still on the campaign trail. A lot of people credit him with really putting Biden over the top. And so we'll see how that plays out. There's also a lot of other names being floated as well. Ketanji Brown Jackson, she actually was she clerked for outgoing now Justice Breyer. So she's definitely one of the top picks. Another is a California Supreme Court Justice, Leandra Kruger. And so the process definitely continues to play out there. The White House did just name some people that are going to be instrumental in it. One of them is former Alabama Senator Doug Jones. He's really going to be kind of the lawmaker liaison, setting up the meetings with a lot of these nominees and things of that nature. So he'll be back on Capitol Hill.
And finally here, I know this is something you worked on a little bit last week, but Congress going after big tech a little bit in terms of their app stores, some of the structuring and all that kind of stuff. I guess what does that entail here? Because that's something, you know, I'm always cruising an app store trying to find something to do.
Yeah, this is definitely interesting for consumers because it should make the process cheaper for them in the long run. Lawmakers here, it's a rare showing of bipartisanship as well that they want to take on big tech. And so that legislation that goes after the app stores specifically, the fact that it advanced out of a Senate committee and now is able to come up for debate on the Senate floor is definitely a big deal. And what this essentially does is it looks at companies specifically like Apple and Google that run their own app stores and it kind of removes them as middlemen and allows the app developers to be able to go directly to the customers. Right now, some of these big tech companies can charge up to 30% fees on the developers, which of course is then passed down to the customers. And so there's a lot of technical things going on here as well, but the overall gist is that lawmakers are hoping to make it cheaper for consumers and then more competitive for these creators.
Oh, she's always in the know on the Hill. Our very own Jesse Tenor, we certainly do appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me back. Honored to be here.
That's right. Alumni are always welcome back here on Capitol View. We'll do it again. And when we come back, we have got more from the Hill. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Welcome back into Capitol View. Last Sunday, former President Donald Trump said the push to update the Electoral Count Act proves former Vice President Mike Pence could have overturned the election in his favor. Our Basil John reports on why that statement could add to momentum on Capitol Hill to clarify what the vice president's role is during the counting of electoral votes.
Lawmakers are pushing back after former President Donald Trump slammed the new effort to overhaul the Electoral Count Act.
The kind of autocratic interference with the electoral count that Donald Trump tried to do will be prohibited, absolutely.
The legislation would clarify the role of the vice president during the electoral vote count process is only ceremonial. While Trump claims this is proof Mike Pence had the authority to overturn the election, Connecticut Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal says he is wrong.
Donald Trump's interpretation of law is the last place you'd want to go to discern what the law really is.
Blumenthal hopes Trump's opposition does not keep Republicans from giving the bill bipartisan support.
Some things are sacrosanct and above the Trump cult.
Lawmakers want to provide as much clarity as possible to the American people. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin believes a clearer process will help eliminate doubts.
Stop the steal. You want to prevent the steal. That's what you want to do, is prevent a steal from happening.
Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley does not believe the vice president can overturn an election, but isn't sure new legislation is needed.
I would be really careful about changing a law that is 150 years old and has governed every presidential election since the 1880s.
The legislation is in the early stages, but lawmakers will meet this week to develop the bill. Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
And we are back to wrap it up after this. Stick around. Watch Capitol View on Sunday morning.
You're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Well, no more papers, no more show, at least for me. This is my final show as the host of Capitol View as I move on to a different endeavor. I want to thank you, the viewers, for joining me each week to listen to me ramble on about politics on the state and national level. And thank you to anyone who stopped me out in the world and said hi and told me they liked the show and watched, especially those who said they just weren't fans of politics, at least beforehand. I want to thank the countless folks who always made themselves available for this show to talk about the issues at hand. A few I want to specifically thank: former Democratic Chairman Michael John Gray, my guy, you always made it work. And then former Chairman of the Republican Party, Doyle Webb, who wouldn't let Michael John get more airtime than he did. Our constitutional representation, your behind-the-scenes teams always made scheduling work, and I, for one, appreciate that. Bill Vickery and Jessica Deloach, you guys always bring the fire in those debates. Keep doing that and keep showing people that we can have disagreements and we can also be civil about that. And to the many lawmakers who are always willing to come on and discuss the issues, there are just too many to name, but I certainly do appreciate the efforts and the candidness that you always brought to the table. And to State Treasurer Dennis Milligan, who always made sure I had the tools of the trade, the pens. They're actually some of the best writing tools that he's got, so make sure you get yourselves one. And I do hope that this is something I was able to do for this show. I was hoping I could bring candidness and openness to this arena. I'm just a regular dude like any of you watching, and I found many times I ask the same questions many of you have about certain issues. And sometimes my curiosity actually reflected yours, and I feel that was part of the success that we were able to have here. I hope I was able to answer many of those questions that we had. I hope I was able to show you that you don't have to be a politico or a diehard about things to be able to care and know what's going on. Politics doesn't have to be this complicated hobby only people like myself or activists can understand. I hope I empowered you to find the facts, read the bills, be up on things. When I started Capitol View, that was my goal, to make politics more casual, easier to understand, because frankly, it can be complicated and there are strong opinions on both sides of many issues, and it can be tough to cut through the rhetoric of those at times. So I hope I was able to do that, and for you, and to pave the way for you to at least be aware of what is going on. Our elected officials, our people, and our Kansans too, and I hope I showed that there is a human side to them. And I thank them for playing along, especially for our holiday segments. I'll say one of the most memorable was Senator Clark Tucker shooting off fireworks during one of the Independence Day ones. And I will give you all candidates, and I hope you'll give them all a chance. Another thing I wanted to do here was expose the public to all of the candidates who are running for office, at least at the state and national level. It's an ever-changing landscape, and it can be tough to keep up with who's in what race and where they stand. I stepped in here to inform. I hope I did that. One of the greatest compliments paid to me was by a lawmaker who said they had no idea where I stood on issues. That was my goal here. I have my own personal takes on what are good ideas and what should be done, but I never wanted those to drive a narrative or even show, because it would not be fair to anyone who might think differently. There were times it got a little spicy on this show, and that's perfectly okay. But what we can do in it is we can respect other opinions and ideas, and we can be civil, which I personally think we need a little bit more of. And just because someone may think differently, it doesn't make them a bad person. I always would try to at least understand both sides of the issue. And even if I personally disagreed, I could at least understand the intent, which I believe we need more of in this arena. I hope your biggest takeaway from my time here is you just care, even just a little. It's important to know that you have to know what's going on. Even if you may not understand all the intricacies of policy or rules of procedure, but you just got to know kind of what's going on out here. I hope I carried the banner of Capitol View like those who came before me, and I hope you'll support and follow whomever occupies this spot here, because I know I will be. So while I won't be here for the next Capitol View, I hope you will be. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.